Hi everyone. Today we are going to be continuing our perspective drawings. This is the Perspective Challenge 3. This time we're going to be doing what's called a bird's eye view. So your job is to show objects on your drawing that show the view from above. So last time we were doing a drawing where we were looking from below, looking up at snowmen. This time we're going to be pretending that we're looking down on one. You need to follow directions on this assignment. I've had to return a bunch of them because they're missing things. So if you're missing parts of the assignment, I will return it to you. You will not receive any points for incomplete work. We've got to watch all the videos and do the directions just like we were in the art room. Because the only way that I can help you is by creating these videos. You need to watch the entire thing and make sure that your assignment meets the requirements when you turn it in. So what are we doing today? Today we will draw a snowman or a polar bear from a bird's eye view. What will we learn? How to show perspective, that's our point of view, in a view from above by shape distortion, looking down this time. So we're showing form, texture, and value with tint and shading, and making lines and shapes that imply movement on the scarf that goes around our polar bear's neck or the neck of our snowman. It is required, so if it's not included, I can tell you haven't watched the video and I will send it back. What supplies do I need? A pencil with an eraser, plain white paper, and something to color with. Use anything that you have. If you have crayons or colored pencils, that would probably work best, but you have to use whatever you have available at home to make your assignment and follow all the directions for it. So what do I need to do? Choose to draw a snowman or a polar bear. Follow along with the video for all of your directions to draw it and add the details to show form, texture, value, and movement. We did the same thing on the previous projects, so just make sure that yours is totally complete this time. Think of it sort of like as an assessment at the end. Also answer the questions below. What are the questions? How did you show texture on your drawing? What details did you add to make flat shapes look like they have form so that it went from a flat shape to something that's dimensional that you could pick up? What do I turn in? A photo of your finished artwork in teams and assignments. Also with your questions. Make sure you have turned your questions in. You can make them as part of a video, you can take a photograph, or you can answer them in the text box. So when we're looking down, we call that a bird's eye view. We're looking from above and shapes get distorted. They move towards the center of our vision. Like this here, you can see where everything sort of meets in the center. We call that a one-point perspective. And that's sort of what we want to go for, but not something quite this high up. So when we say a bird's eye view, you might think of it like this with this pigeon here, but that's not quite what we're going for. This is a great photo that's sort of more like what we're looking for, where you would actually be looking down at something and maybe see your own feet. But we have to pretend that we're a bird where we're not going to see our feet and we're looking down. So everything sort of gets distorted and changed. Sizes get smaller the further they are away from us, but we always think of them as being closer up because we're the ones who are high up. But everything changes. You can only see part of a form. And that includes people. When we draw people, you can see the body, but it's different. It looks like it's kind of smashed in here together. This is a good view of what a bird might actually see looking down from a tree at a person. We like to show every part of the body, but as you can see from here, if you're looking down and they're looking up, perspective is going to change and you're not going to see every single body part completely. And so like here, say you're looking down at your cat, you don't think about it at the time, but you may not see all four paws. We don't see any right there. And this one here, you can see a little bit, but it's a slightly different perspective there too. Now in these examples, students were looking down at a table with some apples on it, and they're very simplified apples, and they sort of created the background. And you can see that they've changed shadow on the plate, but it's all kind of the same view no matter how the apples are arranged. And it's very simplified because it's just a flat apple shape. but they're making it dimensional by adding a shadow. So we need to add dimension. That's changing it from a shape into a form. So a shape is just a plain thing that we draw with our pencils, but to make it look like it's something you could pick up, uh, like an actual snowball or an apple or any kind of a ball, we need to add some tint and shading, which just changes in value. So how are we going to do that on a plain white polar bear? These are some great photos. Polar bears love to look at drones and cameras that are set up and stuff. But we can see when we look at them, we're not going to see the entire polar bear's form, but there are some changes that can show shadows. We can really see the texture of the fur when they're staring up at us. And so we're not going to show the entire form like we're used to. We're not going to see all four legs and things, but we can show some shadow by showing some more dense areas of fur. So if you're just going to do your polar bear with a pencil, it can still be done. And we just want to have the more thick areas of fur shaded in a little bit more, so that we'll add in some, so that'll show some texture by the shadow and the lines that would indicate where the fur is. So we've got to think about what a polar bear's body actually looks like before we distort it and do a view from above, a bird's eye view. So we want to sort of capture the idea of the polar bear without worrying about it being too realistic. And it's a little bit easier with the snowman. But even here, when you look at a snowman from above, you can see that the hat is going to be your main point of view, and it's really hard to distinguish the snow of the snowman from the snow of the background. You can really see how that hat is your biggest thing that you're going to see from looking down. So we're going to do one without a hat, and we'll do scarves on both our polar bear and our snowman. When we're doing the circles for this picture, I already have lots of them that I cut out. If you were here at the elementary school 3 years ago, I was the art teacher then, and my cutouts here came from, so that because we were doing this project, but we cut out the circles out of paper. Since we really can't do that at home, and I can't expect anybody to do that, what you want to do is have 4 circles of anything that you can trace. I'm just going to use my cutouts because they luckily they're still here. I found them in the storage room and I like to use those, but they were cut from simple things like my classroom clock and lids of containers. And then if you look at a cup, the top is a good circle and the bottom is a smaller one. So I'm going to use these 4. You want to try to find actual circular objects. You don't want to have these be too wonky. And it's really hard to draw circles properly without some kind of tools, some kind of a template or a compass if you know how to use one. And so when I cut these, I wanted them to really fill up the space. And what I want to do, you can make them out of cardboard once you have traced onto it. If you want to do circle templates, it's a lot easier. That way you don't have to go, oh man, I need cups again. I got to go look for those in the kitchen. So it's good to make these. You can also just attach a piece of string to the center and then tie it to a pencil. And what will happen is as you move the pencil around where the string is attached from a piece of tape, it'll make a circle just like a compass would. So you can do that, but what you need to do is find things to make 4 circles. If you're doing the polar bear, you only need 3. So I want a large circle. These aren't perfect, but they're closer to perfect than I could draw by hand. So I'm going to do a large circle here, and another one on this one. Yep, that's pretty close. And they weren't perfect to begin with, so the best I can do is good. Now, what I want to just try to line up the second one. Okay. If I'm doing the snowman, I need this one. So we'll make this one the snowman. I'm going to try to line that up in the center. The polar bear does not need this one. That's pretty good. And then Here comes the third one. I'm going to try to put that one in the center of the other two. So I need that for the snowman and my polar bear. So I'm going to put this in the center here. Okay, and last, I'll do the head. So this will be the head of the snowman, my smallest circle. Put it in the center as close as I can get it. I'll do the same thing for my polar bear. Now, I'm drawing pretty dark lines on here. You might not want to have yours to be too dark in case you need to erase, but I'm not going to worry about it for the video. I want the lines to show up so that we can see them. The first thing I want to do for my snowman is to remember that he is going to be looking out in these other directions. He's not looking up at me. I want to imagine that I'm looking at him from maybe up in a tree, like a bird would be looking down. So I want to get a smile here on the side of this snowball. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw very gently. I'm going to draw just some little pieces of coal that would be his nice smile. As I'm imagining, I'm going to see it from above. But then I want to have the carrot nose, which is going to block my view of some of these. So when you draw yours, make sure that you're using a light touch. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a big triangle nose pointing out. So now I'm not going to be able to see these in here. That's okay. I can erase. And then I'll give him a couple of eyes. All right, let's work on the head. If you're doing the polar bear, let's have the polar bear sort of looking up at us this time. So the snowman could look up, but we want to do something a little unusual. So with a polar bear, if he's looking up at us, we're going to see his face. So we've got to make sure that we have his ears in there. So give him an ear over here. And they're kind of flat. They don't really stick up like a teddy bear might. And then I'm going to do sort of a rounded oval shape for his nose. It's on his snout. And then his nose will be here at the bottom. And I want to give him a couple of eyes looking up at me. Now, if you want to make him really cute and give him really big eyes or something, you can go ahead and do that. All right, so the snowman is looking that way, somewhere in the distance. Okay, the polar bear is looking up. So based on these, you can decide which one you want to do. Okay. What we want to do really for the rest of it, this next circle that is underneath our polar bear's head and underneath our snowman's head, it's going to be a scarf. So I'm just going to do a stripy pattern for these, and then I'll come back and color it in. And yes, your picture does need to be in color, whatever you have. So if you're using a pencil, draw your lines lightly so that you can erase, or use a darker, deeper line to make sure it really shows up. If you have a black colored pencil, that's fine too, if you want to draw the lines, because black shows up better, but it also doesn't want to erase. I'm going to count my stripes really quickly. I should have an even number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay. All right, so I just wanted to make sure I had an even number of stripes on the scarf. Now I want to do the same thing for the polar bear so that I wouldn't have to erase and draw an extra one because I wouldn't have enough room for all my stripes. All right, so I'm just going around it because we got to picture it that it's sitting on the neck. And if we were to walk up to it, we would see the stripes going the other way. But from the center to the edge, we're going to see those stripes sticking on out, like from the center, like a kind of like a fan or flower petals. So now I want to do it the other way for the scarf to be blowing in the wind. Now, I've got to have some room for my polar bear's feet. I'm only going to see his feet sticking out here at the bottom. Let's go ahead and give him some feet. There's his front feet. I want to give him some big, long claws that are sticking out. I'll do the same thing over here. They actually have 5 toes. Sorry about that. Forgot. Now, depending on if you're doing that in marker or pencil or colored pencil, you might want to handle your claws a little differently. So there's his front feet. Then I want to give him his back feet. Now he's going to be sitting, his feet are not going to be sticking out behind him this time. They are going to just be where we can just barely see them a little bit. So he's going to be sitting up like maybe a dog or a cat would, which means his feet are going to be closer to the sides of his head. He's not laying back. We're going to go ahead and make sure that they're no further back than his eyes. Let's go ahead and put one there and put one there and add the claws and those big, big claws in between in the toes. From what I understand, all bears have 5, but a panda actually has a little thing that sort of works like a thumb to help it grab onto bamboo pieces. So it's almost like it's got 6, but it's not really a thumb. So it doesn't actually have 6 fingers. All right, so now I want to go ahead and put the tail of his scarf going down. Now the tail is going to be up and down like it normally would, so we're going to just go ahead and let it blow on out. I'm going to just do some curvy lines, go across and try to copy those curvy lines a little bit. There's the top part of the scarf, so it's knotted and the rest of the scarf is flowing away from him. And then I'm going to put another one. They're going to be pretty close together at the knot part, but then they'll split away from each other and sort of curve that back. And I would want to erase in my lines here, and maybe I'll add some tassels. But on my snowman, I think I'll put them over here. And he's going to have his little stick arms coming out. So I want to make sure that those are not in the way. So I can do the scarf. I can put it either in the front of him, which might probably be a good idea, or maybe behind him. So let's go ahead and put it behind him. And I'll just go ahead and draw a curvy line and try to copy it a little bit. And then make the other one come out of the same area and just be a little different so it looks like it's blowing in the cold wind. We could add some tassels on the bottom. Fringe, I think it's called. So you do fringe. And this would be the time that you would want to go back and erase lines like here on the circles. Okay, so I would erase in here and in here. And erase in here and in here. Now my scarf had stripes on it. So I want to add the same stripes, but this time they're just going to go sort of following an up and down kind of thing. So I want to try to make them about the same distance apart as they were around the neck. I'll do the same thing here. Try to sort of follow sort of a curvy thing that makes it look like it's still moving in the like in a cold, icy wind. So when you do things like this, you're sort of showing some movement. And little touches like that are what make drawings go from being sort of meh to being a lot more realistic. And you say, ooh, I'll add those in there. The fabric's not straight, so our lines don't have to be straight and perfect and even. Make them wave a little bit. So it really looks like that scarf is blowing in the wind. Okay? And then for the snowman, let's go ahead and finish him off. Now, normally snowmen have like 3 snowballs, a large one on the bottom, which would be our largest ring, and then a medium one. And then you sit the smaller one on top for the head. We did our drawings for our last project. We just did 2-headed snowmen because it would have been a lot harder to go ahead and do 3. It's really hard to navigate if you did a snowman in every corner. So they would each have 3 snowballs, a large, a medium, and a small. So we just sort of did a large and a small for the project for last week. But on this one, we can still do the same thing of showing things in the distance. We can make the pieces of coal that go down the front. So it looked like he was wearing a coat. We can make them a little bit flatter looking. So it looks like they're also kind of in the distance from us. If we are looking down, if we're a bird in a tree looking down at the snowman, let's add in some texture. We'll add in some just tiny broken wavy lines across the carrot to make it look like it's dried out like carrots do. So our last part here is to add some sticks for hands. I'm going to go ahead and have mine just going across to fill up my space. I'll just go ahead and give that little curve so it looks like it got stuck in there. And I'll draw my branches. So when you draw branches, don't overthink it. You're sort of going along there, and you can make a little something stick out along the way. Nothing fancy. And then I'm just going to let it end at a point. So there's one, and I'm going to put the other one on the other side. Slightly curved line. And just do some points sticking out on my branch. Then I'll follow my line again. And just a couple little pointy parts where branches would be. And maybe it's a little bump on the side from where branch had been. Right, so just use your imagination on those. Then, of course, we're going to go ahead and erase inside if you did the snowman. Okay, so you want to make sure that all of your lines that you don't want to have showing are erased. And I've had a lot of students turning in work that's not finished. The work has to be finished, and in order to finish it, you need to find something to color with. If you're not following the directions on videos, I will be sending them back to you. You need to follow them just like if you were in the art room. Now, what we want to show also is form. These are just sort of plain, boring old lines. So the reason you have to use color on these is to show some of that form and show what's actually going on with things. Now, with our snowmen on last week's project, we went around the circles and added in some blue. Now let's go ahead and do that, but remember that you want it to be inside of the shapes that you drew. So I want it to be on the inside of this line. And I can add the blue going on around. And now it looks much more dimensional because it's not flat. So you can do this with crayon. I'm just doing it with colored pencil because that's what I just happen to have here. If you're using markers, it might not give you the effect you're looking for. But yes, you actually do have to show shading. You actually do have to show form. It's going to be a little bit different for our polar bear friend. I can do that with a black colored pencil or a regular pencil, but I want to show some texture as well. It's down here. And I'm going to add my blue around the edges of every circle I drew so that it looks like it's inside of the cardboard. It doesn't really work on a polar bear. So you would say, okay, what color can I use for a polar bear? Let's not worry about color. Let's do some shading. Now that can be done by adding lots of short lines that will look like his fur. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little more blue here. Crayon works very, very well also, especially if you have lighter blue colors. I'm using a very, very, very light touch to start with. And then I think I may add a little bit more blue, make it a little bit darker like this, closer to the edge of the line. So okay, if I'm a little bit over, but I want to try to keep the color inside where the cardboard circle was that I drew. So in your case, like when you drew, if you used, say, a cup or whatever, you would want it to be inside of that cup that you traced for your circle shape, not on the outside. I'll do the same thing for the head, just a little bit. And it just makes it go from looking like a flat old circular line to actually looking like a ball of snow. So I can go ahead and add that. And I'm going to come around and do the same thing with my polar bear, but I'm going to use my pencil to do that. Let me get these eraser pieces off. Now, what happens with polar bears? They have very, very, very thick fur. So what I want to do, I can go ahead and make some jagged lines around here to look like thick fur to give him some texture. And I can do it around his head also, maybe even on his snout a little bit. I'll do some inside of the ears. You don't have to do this part if you don't feel like it, but I can go ahead and add some lines. And all I'm doing is sort of following the circle to add in some jagged lines around the edge and around his head. So around my circle and around the curve of his head, so it looks like his fur. So they can be jagged lines that might be sticking out just a little bit, but I can also just add some really light lines in here and just keep on building up. I'm using a little bit stronger amount of pressure on here than I might normally do because I want it to show up on the video, but I can keep on going. Now I can start to see that texture's really starting to build up. Now he's looking really fuzzy and furry. And I can use a combination of some thick lines and some thin lines. I just sort of follow around, keep adding in some shading, kind of like the blue on the snow. So I'm just going to go around my circle, keep adding in some of those light lines. So he's looking like he's got lots and lots of hair in there. So I'm going to do the same thing around here. I'm going to do some jagged lines that sort of look like his hair is a little uneven. And give some texture to my circle so that he is not perfectly even and smooth. He certainly wouldn't be as a polar bear. I can even add some fur in his paws if I want to. Just add that in on the edges, just showing some texture to our polar bear. Some jagged edges on that over my circle, so it just looks like a thicker line, and adding in my textures. Okay, just a few coloring tips while I'm working on this here. So I added in some black colored pencil to the areas that I know are going to be black on my snowman and on my polar bear, but you can still keep adding in lines even if you want to around the edges of things to make your polar bear look fuzzy. Maybe he needs a tuft of hair, just some short, light lines. If you feel like it, you can put them around the scarf. Now on the scarves, I can use regular color on the tails here, the tails of the scarf, the ends of the scarf that are sticking out, but I'm making the edges a little bit darker, just like the snowball. The snowball is a tightly, firmly packed bit of snow. So even though snow is fluffy, a snowball can hurt because it's all packed in there tight together. Like if you were trying to make a ball out of sand on the beach, you'd have to really pack it in tightly, and that will make it much more solid, which is also what can give it a blue sheen in the daytime. But I'm making the edges here of the orange scarf and the green scarf on the edges of that circle a little bit darker so that they'll show form as well. Now, a couple of coloring tips. I'm showing texture on my carrot with some lines going across, but since the sun's kind of shining down on it, I really only need to fill in some color on the edges because it's not going to be too super dark. I want to show some area that the sun is shining down on. So I can sort of think of these as shading, just like on the stripe. I'm just using my regular color and then just keep on adding color on the edges. So I'll keep on adding colors on the edges of the carrot. And I can add in a little yellow if I want to try to mix colors together. That depends on what you have and what you're interested in. And the other way of showing some texture and some shading is going ahead and making your darker areas with pencil before you add color. You can do it afterward, but it won't show up if you're using crayon. It's only going to show up with paint and markers and colored pencils. So I can come in here and add in my brown for my sticks, but maybe it's not going to be even because my tree branch might not be even. So I'm going to leave the lightest area in the center where the sun would be shining on it, but I'll add in some bumps because that's what tree branches are full of. But I want to get that color in there. And in the areas where I have this extra pencil shading, it's going to show up darker. So if you're doing this with marker, for example, it's really hard to get colors to blend the way that you want to, even if you have a bunch of markers together. So if you add in a little bit of extra pencil marking and then put in some little notches and little lines, then it's going to look more like wood would feel when you touch it. Same thing on this side. And then for the scarves, I've got fringe on the bottom, and I just want to sort of copy the lines that I made with my colors to sort of show movement. It's moving in the breeze maybe, and also to show that it's soft. The scarf is not hard and tightly packed like snow, and it's not fluffy like our polar bear. So we want to add in some color, but what matters is what kind of line are we using? How are we showing that it's soft? A polar bear has very thick fur, but may not really be soft, but we're showing that texture with jagged lines. Maybe it's not quite so soft like the fringe on the scarf. All right, and just to show how to fill these in to add your extra color that shows some different values. When you're using red, a lot of people like to use pink, and they say, well, I can't make pink out of red. Well, pink is just red with white showing through, or if you added white to it. So we call it a tint. So if I put on just a little bit of red and I don't push really hard, I've got a nice tint of red that looks more pink. As I go toward the middle, I'm going to start adding more layers of color down. And then when I go towards the edge of the circle where I want to show shading, I'm not adding black for that. The value is being shown here by putting more intense color down. So I'm pushing a little bit more and getting a little bit more red in there. So it is shading, but with just more layers of color to show that it's darker. And same thing here, like I can show that there's some shading where this was underneath this part of the scarf. I can show some where this piece of the scarf is under the top piece. I can do some shading in there because I've got a nice tint, and then I've got some more red going on in here that would be a little bit darker, and then even a little bit more red after that will make a shade. I can do the same thing with my orange just to show that the lighter one is on top and it's capturing more light, Make a little bit more color down here and have less white showing through so that more color shows on my paper. So I'm starting out with my tint, very, very light, letting lots of that white background paper show through, and I'll fill that in. Then I'm going to come back and start adding more color down from the edge, because that's where I want to show that it would be shaded. So I'm not adding black, I'm not adding any pencil or anything, I'm just adding more color. And now when I look at it, I need to check and make sure that all of my edges meet up and it looks much more realistic. Same thing with our polar bear here. It looks much more like the edge of the circle is further away and darker. And when you add in your extra colors for highlights for things like, I did put in some orange, some yellow in here for the carrot to show that some more light was hitting it. I can do the same thing and just add a little bit of light red so that I'm going from a lighter color of yellow, which is primary, to a secondary color, which is orange, which is red and yellow together, and finally to red to just make it pop a little bit. I know that my carrot's not red, but now it's really going to stick out from the page. And you want to be showing texture. You can show very, very little color to show where sunlight is hitting something, and then add some pencil into darker colors if you like, or colored pencil to do that shading. You can always do your shading by adding black to it if you need to show some real depth. Don't forget to show your textures. How would it feel? You can always show that by how much of your color you're showing, how intense it is, and the lines that you're creating. They're not nice and smooth lines. These are pointy edges, so I think that stick would probably hurt if you got poked. So we can fill in some color, but we want to leave in a couple of really light areas to show that light is showing through, and that's where the sunlight's hitting it, and then sort of medium colors to show the color of the stick itself, and then the darker colors that would show our shading. That way we get a whole range of values for uh, our project. So I'm just going to be finishing up the final details of my circles, making sure all my ends meet up. So I can't wait to see what yours is. Don't forget, it needs to be finished. It needs to be in color. You need to show some texture and value. Did you add a darker color? Did you show white going through texture on your bear, or the blue that's showing up on the snow to show that it's been tightly packed, and the softness of your scarf with some movement? So if you have any questions, let me know, and please make sure that you have met all of the requirements for the assignment before you turn it in. If you are missing stuff, I will be sending it back to you. Please follow all of your art assignments just like you would in the art room. Have a great day.